The following episode is an excerpt from the HLN private membership. It's a session I led titled Radical Rehumanizing. It was recorded and shared with permission. If you want to join our membership and get weekly, daily events and support, please sign up for our 7-week course, which begins on October 6th, and afterwards you will get an invitation. This session was co-facilitated by my friends and colleagues, Camille and Doolin. Let's have a listen. Welcome back, my friends. Nice to see your faces. Take a moment to settle in together. And just start by feeling what you're holding. As you come in, whether you want to settle your head back, whether you want to grab a pillow, maybe you're walking or driving. Just notice what it's like to be here in this moment and see what your body's carrying. Just on its own, not even about the topic yet, but just on its own, what you're holding. Maybe taking a moment to orient to the screen. Anyone that wants to put their cameras on, just for the opening, orienting to see who's here and to make some FaceTime with each other. That's always great to do, especially around any topics that create activation. It's great to kind of get into the tapestry of the people for a moment. And I wanted to just clarify some things about this particular meeting. We never share membership meetings with the public. This is one of the few I'm going to be sharing with the public. None of you are going to be seen unless you speak during the recorded time. So when you're on camera now, that doesn't go anywhere. You're only going to see me speaking and my co-facilitators. We'll have a moment where you can give wisdom, you can ask questions, you can DM Camille especially, so we can have some back and forth and people can get the wisdom from that. But then I'm going to reserve 30 minutes of membership recorded time, but not public recorded time, just so everyone knows. So there will be time to weave as we're used to in a private setting. The first chunk of this is going to be recorded as it is now, and that recording will go out into the world at some point in the next week or two. Okay. And the reason why I wanted to do that was it's a very, very rare thing. I don't know if I've ever done it before, maybe one other time. There's such an incredible capacity that I have experienced from people being in membership, going through so much together and going through so many incredible life changes and cultural changes and just holding each other through it and learning from it, that I initially was going to have a free webinar similar to ones I've done in the past with different ruptures. And I thought, no, I don't want to do a webinar. I want to let the public in on a really magical, intimate space, not to exploit any of you or us or what we do here, but to actually share what's possible when you have connection and when you have safety in yourself and you have these practices around conversations and topics that can be really polarizing. So that's my intention, just so you know where it's coming from. And like I said, I'm being really clear that I will tell you when we're going into private space. Until I say that, it's going to be public what gets recorded, and only when people are talking. Some of you are comfortable with that. So if we go into moments of weaving that are recorded for the public, go for it. If you want your face to be seen, you can turn your camera off. If you just want to speak, and you can also DM Camille if you want it to be anonymous. Otherwise, wait until I say it. We're going into private space. Does that make sense? When we first start landing in with just that, so you can really catch up to that. And if anything's unclear, you can DM Camille anytime and she'll clarify it for you. So first of all, I'm really grateful that Camille was open to the pivot. I'm really grateful that we're being joined by my sister, brother, bitch, Gray. I'm really glad that I have these people in my life who have the ability who come from demographics and groups that should be outraged by certain things, and they aren't because of the work they do with themselves. And even when they find outrage, they know how to hold it. So it feels like a great privilege and honor just to have them as co-facilitators to lead this discussion with me and to hold it in different ways, similar ways that I will, maybe different ways that I will. I'm never looking for agreement. I'm always looking for connection, and that goes for all of you. So as we kind of weave and go into this topic together today, really notice if you're trying to, pledge your allegiance to what I'm saying, or if you're really feeling how you feel about what I'm saying and you're able to bring that, because that's what makes these topics really juicy. And it's what makes relationships juicy and delicious. And for me, creates more trust. What made me want to do this was, we did a similar thing last year when there was the attempted assassination of Donald Trump. And if everyone remembers, my focus wasn't on the politics. It wasn't on if it was a right or bad decision. It wasn't on did he, deserve it or not. It wasn't on any of that. It was on what happened in your body afterwards that shows your body if you've dehumanized this person or not, if you deeply fear this person or not, if you have exceptions for your own rules against gun violence or your own rules about empathy. Is there a moment where something crosses a line for you? That's what I think is important around this conversation today. That's my intention, what I'm bringing, is where do we cross our own integrity around our hearts and our humanity and how we feel about other people that we don't agree with. And what an incredible segue from the usual topic today, capacity for difference. Because when you see someone, in my opinion, who gets killed for opinions and beliefs that we don't like, even someone that believes in policies we don't like, we're seeing a low capacity for difference, in my opinion. And so we want to get a sense of how do I mirror that in my own body instead of this kind of external collective thing. People like to say America's divisive. Well, it's divisive because there's individuals who are divisive. So in our own bodies, how do we divide? How do we constrict against? How do we get into the dehumanizing of another person? Someone we don't even know, to the point where we actually celebrate and become joyful when someone's killed. That's what interests me. Now, I'll be curious later on as we share where you land. I don't know where you are with any of this. I'll find out. What moved me to do this was online, the amount of celebration I was seeing from people and the actual justification of dehumanizing this man, Charlie Kirk, who was assassinated last week, almost a week ago. Today, a little over a week ago. It was the justification of dehumanizing that really interested me. It wasn't, I'm so relieved his rhetoric scared me. It wasn't that. It wasn't, I really disagreed, but he shouldn't be killed. It wasn't that. It was people sending me videos trying to prove why I should be happy he's dead. Over and over and over again. And it led me to deep curiosity of, okay, from what state, from what physiology does somebody over and over and over try to prove to me that I should be okay that someone's dead or happy that someone's dead? And what does it mean for them that they're angry with me that I'm humanizing somebody? And I was holding those two all week. And I was telling Camille the other day, and Gray, I haven't felt a grief like this in a long time, which really surprised me. It was the last thing I expected. I have a lot of capacity for death. Death doesn't really get to me. I think it's really beautiful, actually. I think it's very mysterious and sacred. So I never believe that someone should or shouldn't die a certain way. I'm kind of like, it's interesting how it happens for each of us. I think it's a divine path. So I don't really go too deeply into that. I don't agree with him being killed, but I don't really deeply mourn the death itself. What I found myself grieving was people's willingness to defend hatred and dehumanization. That's what started hurting my heart. So I was thinking, what happened? And someone wrote to me in my DMs, I loved the question. She said, I have been dehumanizing him. This is a friend of mine who's very conscious. I have been dehumanizing him. I have been sending videos around proving why he's horrible and should have been killed. And your posts are making me ask myself, at what point did I cross the line? Because this is someone that does really deep humanizing practices herself. And she was really curious, like, where did I cross the line? I didn't even feel the line get crossed to me, but somewhere it did. Somewhere I decided this was the story I wanted to tell about this person. And I wanted to tell the story to justify why I think this is a great thing. And that was the thing that really got me. It was, there's a line we cross, and this is where somatics come in. And for the sake of confidentiality, this is going to be public. I won't say the member's name, but someone in this exact meeting the other day talked about that pinprick. You know who you are, and some of you know who this person is. And I loved that. I loved that because I've said before that if you don't hear or feel the whispers of your body, you then get the shouts. You then get like the whisper becomes a hurricane, essentially. That pinprick is such a good way to put it. Because when my friend said, where, at what point did I cross the line? It's the pinprick we don't notice. That little pinprick that we decide to not even touch, or the pinprick we decide to justify and grow and tend to. There's one thing if I tend to the pinprick, like, what do you need? What are you teaching me? And there's another thing where I say, I want more of these pinpricks. And it's something just to be curious about. I'll say a few more things, and of course, I'm going to bring in some of Camille's wisdom, some of Gray's, and then we're going to go back and forth a bit, then I'm going to bring in all of you. You know, my practice around dehumanizing found me, or rehumanizing, and dehumanizing, like realizing where I do it, found me when I was 19. This is nothing I sought. I'm not a good person. It was like an accidental experience that happened, where I was sitting in my apartment, my first apartment I had when I left my hometown. And because, MySpace and different social medias were starting, I had gotten information that one of the boys who caused me the most pain in sexual trauma and harassment in my life growing up had died. And I expected myself to feel relief because every time I would go back to my hometown, I'd be shackled with dread. I'm going to see him. I'm going to see his friends. I'm going to have this experience of all this happening again is not safe. So his death, in that moment when I read it, I was shocked because it was the last thing I expected. But then I was shocked that I didn't feel happy. Instead, I felt this deep, deep grief. And the first thing my conscious mind said to me was, here you go again, letting people win, right? Here you go again, not holding people accountable, Luis. Like, here you go again, apologizing and justifying bad behavior. That was what my mind was saying to me. Yet I couldn't, no matter how hard I try, feel relief. Because some part of me knew, and I remember this very clear, I've never talked about this publicly, but a year and a half after the event happened, what was so painful about the event for me, first of all, was he went to school the next day and told everybody I came on to him because he was afraid that I would say this information. And, his force with me, just to give you a little understanding, left scars on my breast, just to give you an idea of how brutal it was for me. The next day I went to school and he had told everybody at school that I came on to him. So for the next 4 years, I was brutally harassed. I was branded a faggot, a pussy, a woman man, like everything you can imagine. So it wasn't just that one moment, which was, terrifying for me and like lots of shame and pain, but it was this, he represented this experience of being dehumanized. He dehumanized me and then told a story about his friends, which further dehumanized me. And then I lived in a dehumanized state at school and with myself until around 11th grade is when it stopped. Right? So 4 or 5 years. That initiation into being dehumanized and then dehumanizing myself, if you've ever felt that, I never wanted anyone to feel that again. I didn't care what they did. I just remember living in that, wanting to kill myself, feeling completely alone. It wasn't even true. So I was especially sensitive to how quickly people believe other people's perceptions of someone. And I had this unconscious desire from that point on, unconscious, I didn't really know it, but I felt this wanting to understand all this stuff that was floating in me. And then it all collided in that moment, 8 years later after the event occurred, 19 years old, seeing that he's dead and feeling grief. And one of the first memories that came to my mind was sitting at the lunch table a year and a half after this happened, an assigned lunch table. And of course, he happened to be assigned to this table. And I looked at him and he said something to me about, let's hang out. And I said, no way. And he said, why? And I said, you know. And he looked completely stunned and confused. And I believed him. I believed that he was so disconnected from the experience that he wasn't even there, which I've seen happen a lot with people who have been abused, especially by their parents who are alcoholics, people who are dissociative. The person that does it doesn't even remember it. So you can't get accountability from them. You can't get validation from them. But what I'm saying is I witnessed in that moment, it was middle of 7th grade, like, whoa, I believe he doesn't even recollect the hell I'm in. And at 19, when I found out he died, these things all came together. And the means by which he died, I understood this was someone that deeply hated themselves. Someone that was so torn that they lost their heart. They were able to do this to someone who was completely innocent and just wanted a friend. And that was like what I needed in that moment. I get teary-eyed just thinking about it. Like that was the kind of signal. That's why I felt grief instead of hatred. How could I hate someone that hated themselves so much they could dehumanize somebody? It just didn't feel good. It felt like I was doing the same thing. And so from that point to this point here, I've been consistently practicing this. Again, not because I think I'm good. I really hate that idea. It's because it feels so horrific in my bones to dehumanize someone. It feels so horrific. And I don't assume it should for everybody. This is my path. That's why I'm teaching it. That's why I talk about it. People who show up are obviously interested, but no one has to do this the way I do it. But I find with my friends who have the same kind of radical practice, and I'll let Camille and Grace speak for themselves in a bit, many of us got here because of something, whether it was a hell we went through, whether it was a being born with a curiosity, understanding what it's like to be oppressed or hated or dehumanized, and not wanting to perpetuate it, not wanting to justify it, not wanting to continue contributing to it, because there's plenty of people already doing that for me. But like a somatic therapist is trained to do, find the counter vortex. And everyone here knows the power of pendulation. When you are sitting with all your pain, your anxiety, your self-hatred, and I or Camille or someone else says, and what else is there? And you're like, there's something else? You know, it's like a shock that there could be something more, right? That's the act of rehumanizing yourself. And we know how powerful that feels when we do it. When you're not just your anxiety, when you're not just your self-hatred, when you're not just the horrible thing you did 20 years ago, when you're not any of those things. But in this moment, oh my gosh, there's a part of me that's soft. There's a part of me that likes me. There's a part of me that speaks kindly to myself. I never knew that was there. And we know when we pendulate between the part that's tense and the part that's soft, this amazing alchemy emerges and something transforms inside of us. And we also know without finding the counter vortex, we increase our activation and we dissociate. Now, if we know that on an individual level, why would it be any different for the collective? If there's already a group of people agreeing we should hate, why is my contribution to that going to transform anything? If it doesn't do it in my own bones with myself, how is it going to transform the collective? So I would be a hypocrite to teach this work the way I teach it and believe in it to the depth I believe in it and see the transformations all around the world, beyond cultures, beyond sexes, and in the same breath say, except for here, except for this person, except for this situation, I can't do that. I can't live with myself if I do that. You don't have to teach the stuff. You're allowed to do it. But I hold myself to a really different integrity because of that. So when I see the news that Charlie Kirk was assassinated, and I feel this way when anyone is, by the way, when I see this news, and specifically as it involves free speech and fear of what someone's saying and a massive difference of opinion and policy, the first thing I think of is a human brother has been killed. I don't think about a Republican. I don't think about a Democrat. I don't think about someone as pro-life. I think a person who was once a child was just killed and people are celebrating. That's the same thing I think when I see images from Gaza. It's the same thing I think when I see images from October 7th. It doesn't matter to me who it is. I see a human and my heart aches. And I think that's beautiful. I don't think that's a bad thing. And so I go into it and I like to get to know, I want to know this person outside of the bias. I want to know this side of a conflict of war outside of the bias. I want to know this controversial celebrity outside of the bias, because the bias is one part of the truth, one part of the experience, one part of the perception, but there's a whole other mystery, and I know that from pendulation. If I could find a part of myself that didn't want to kill myself, I can do this with anybody. And so this is what motivates me, which I'm trying to be really clear about, because my practice of radical rehumanizing can be seen as being an apologist, can be seen as justifying bad behavior, of bypassing. Whereas in my bones, in my experience, rehumanizing is the opposite of bypassing. I am with my heart while I'm also with my preferences and my opinions and how I feel. And it makes me more whole. Whereas when I'm hating somebody or even going into the bias place of looking for evidence why they deserve something or why they're bad, I feel less whole. I feel like I'm with a part of myself that's taking over and the other parts have completely disconnected. So my intention here is to bring that background and why I do this personally before we go into some of the nitty gritty as we get into back and forths, and just to ask you before I bring Camille on to feel into your own body right now. And I'm using Charlie Kirk as my catalyst. Use anybody. Who's your catharsis? Who's your catalyst? What's your experience where you think, I'm so glad the person's dead. I wish that person was dead. They deserve to be mocked. Whatever it is. It might not even be death for you. It might be something that happened 40 years ago. Maybe you've never done it. Like, amazing. But just see how it feels in your body when you want that. When you want someone else to be harmed or mocked or dehumanized. See if you can sense that for a moment. Notice your heart space, especially your throat, your stomach, your solar plexus. What do those parts do? What do those parts feel? And I'd love you to DM Camille just to give some description, and she'll share anonymously just so we can get a felt sense in the room collectively. Like, what is the somatic experience of dehumanizing somebody? What is it? What does it actually feel like? And notice, I'm not saying it's right or wrong, actually. I just want to know what it actually feels like. How does your body feel from it?
There's terror in my chest before dehumanizing. I feel a laser beam from my womb. Tension, constriction, a deep sadness and heaviness. When I think about my abusive father being publicly shamed, a big rush of energy surges through my body like a release. My entire torso feels like it's being crushed. Feels like I want to implode. Tension and guilt. A deep sadness. Constriction in my throat and gut.
There's one more you can.
Uh, I've only ever wanted to kill one person, and when I feel into that, my insides go soft, sad, tears. I know I don't want the person dead, while my body feels the soft embrace of why.
I love these so much because one thing I want to say is the animal in us wants these things. It is a historical tribal fact that when someone opposes you, there is a potential life threat. So that lives in our bones. When someone has hurt us or destroyed us to a certain sense, they represent a life threat. And animalistically, we would fight to the death. Right? It happens everywhere. The whole animal kingdom, you will see this happening. We have this unique gift and privilege to pause and use our minds to ask if we want to go into those animal instincts or not. That's really what the technology of somatic psychology and somatic experiencing is to me. It's my conscious mind relating to my animal body. And this somatic experience y'all are sharing right now, it's a beautiful thing to tend to, because a lot of that constriction, as you heard some people say, there is terror in that. Dehumanizing somebody comes from a vulnerable place, in my opinion. It's not a powerful, horrible, destructive person dehumanizing someone. This is why, in the same breath I humanize Charlie Kirk, I humanize the person killing him. Tyler Robinson, I humanize. That's also a child killing somebody. I can't imagine living with that for the rest of my life. I'd rather be killed than kill somebody, to be honest. So it's like the whole thing can be here. We can humanize it all, but we have to first see, when we dehumanize, there's terror, there's fear, there's pain, there's lack of trust, there's angst. And the animal urge is get rid of the thing causing those sensations. That's the normal animal response. That's why we have so much war and violence and hatred in the world, because we don't know how to tend to that very old animal thing that lives in us for survival. There's a reason it's there. I'm going to pivot to Camille to bring in her wisdom around this. Anything you want to bring in?
I mean, I'll start with saying that just so everyone can orient, that it's very possible I might be very curt today, because I am recognizing, when it comes to this topic of dehumanization, I'm very bored. And actually, let me be even more specific. I'm not bored. I am confused and exhausted by it. I am just, it is just illogical to me. And to Luis's point, I think the lack of logic to it first came to my awareness in my own experience. First, being of African lineage, I saw my own dehumanization. I saw the dehumanization of my ancestors, and okay, I know what that is, and I know I don't want to do that to other people. But what was surprising to me is to see that people who experienced dehumanization as their own coping mechanism would turn around and dehumanize others. And I just couldn't logically understand it. And I attribute that a bit to my autism, and I'm thankful for it. But I couldn't make sense of it. So there is the illogical nature of it that that confuses me. I don't understand what one hopes to accomplish with dehumanizing another. But then there's the other part of it too. Like, this is not a moral thing. There's the logic part of it, and then I'm just too fucking lazy to dehumanize another person. Like, it takes a lot of energy and effort to dehumanize someone. It's exhausting. We talk about capacity a lot. I have very limited space, time, energy, and money. And quite frankly, I don't want to waste it dehumanizing another person. There are other things I'd much rather spend it on. And yeah, I don't get it. Like, as I sit with all of it, I continue to be confused. Like, even we can look at this example that's happening with Charlie Kirk. Charlie Kirk, through his rhetoric, dehumanized a lot of people. Then Tyler Robinson dehumanizes him. Then Charlie Kirk's widow comes out with a statement, and that she's dehumanizing people, and it just continues to perpetuate itself. And what I think I grieve most about this most recent situation is that there was a moment, like a glimpse, a part of me that, okay, a conservative individual, quote unquote conservative individual, gets assassinated. Maybe this is the time we can actually have a discourse and say, like, see, conservative folks or folks who support Charlie Kirk, this is why we're saying we'd like gun reform. But the chance for that conversation was lost. And that's what I think I grieve the most. It's like the lives of Charlie Kirk and Tyler Robinson could have been used in a very, very different way. And we didn't use it that way. And I think I'm, again, confused and exhausted by that. And then I know I'm rambling a bit, but I'm also just sitting with what's happening in Gaza. That is just kind of heavy on my spirit right now for a couple of reasons. And that I mean, what's been happening has been happening, but like I anticipated, it's no longer the social justice thing du jour. So it's no longer top of mind for people. But two, the genocide that's happening within Gaza is only going to perpetuate the dehumanization of Israel and Israelis. And it's just going to continue back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. So, yeah, that's where I am with all of this.
I want us just to feel that for a minute and feel it, how it lands in your own bodies. Like even Camille's physiology and her voice, like you can feel the exhaustion. You can feel the kind of like, right? Just notice that when you're all feeling that somatic experience around your own state, when you dehumanize, everything I heard when that's happening in my body, it contributes to the great fatigue. These aren't really enlivening states. They are initially enlivening. There's a bolstering of activation that comes in at first. Then it gets really exhausting. It's a lot for the body to keep up. And this is why I never got into political collective work. I mean, I do this collective work, but even in the collective work I do, and I know Camille's similar to this, we really, really speak to the individual and the collective. Because as she says, you know, these dehumanizing gets passed back and forth, back and forth. It's not going to stop anytime soon. It gets to stop in you. That's the privilege of being an individual. You get to look at your society and your culture, people and groups you feel like you belong to, family, whatever it is, friends, and you can see them do this. And you can remind yourself how you do this. And you have complete power and agency to interrupt yourself from doing it. You can't make someone else. You can't end a war. I think grieving for what you can't fix is the most brilliant thing to do. And then using that energy to apply it to yourself is the next brilliant thing to do. Because when you said, Camille, like using the lives of Charlie Kirk, Tyler Robinson, it's a gorgeous way to say it. It's like death is so sacred to me. It is like a portal. And when someone dies, so much space opens up. We've worked on that in this membership before. Like when we're grieving and we're feeling really rocked by death, it's because we're rocked by all the space, all the what's in the absence of the thing that was there before. There's more room in a weird way. So here, like Camille said, this huge space, which is the beauty of conflict. Again, think of it as the earth. The hurricane rips through the forest. Huge space created, all the trees are broken. There's all this openness. And now we get to come in and repair and rebuild and be even more fertile. That's how it works in nature. This opportunity of loss and space from loss and attention can be used to further the dehumanization, mirror the other side back and forth, or to interrupt the cycle. And if I was in couples therapy with the left and the right, which is like my true fantasy all the time, I would be like, okay, remember how during the Biden administration, you hated the idea of hate speech? I did too. Now you see how it feels. This is how it feels when someone says something about someone you love or an idea of yours, and it gets to your heart. And you hated being censored and you hated being canceled. I did too. And now you're doing it. Now you're threatening TV hosts. Now you're firing people because of how they feel or what they say. You're doing the same thing the left did. And then I could look at the left. I could be like, you were the ones that told me about gun violence being a problem. And now you're cheering at someone dying from a bullet. You too are the same person. And that's why you hate each other. And I've had this come up in actual couples therapy over the years, where two people are just dying to tell me which one's worse. And they are exactly the same. They have different beliefs. They have different ways of being the same. But at the core of it, they are the same basic bitch. I am the same basic bitch. It's just, am I in relationship with it? Or am I imagining that, well, I'm allowed to be because ... And I've seen these sentences online of, well, they did this, but we're doing it because it's more asked for now. It's okay if we do it. It's still you doing the same thing and amplifying it. And I think this is your curtness, Camille, right? This is the part for you where like, I don't even have space for this. It's just the same thing. It's so boring over and over again.
It is. It is. And I've heard it phrased similarly, not even just like with dehumanization, but amongst friends and families, family members, you know, I'll keep it respectful as long as they stay respectful. Well, then that's not respect. Like if your respect is contingent on them being respectful, it was never respect to begin with. And that's what again, it's not logical to me when that comes up. I also want to be really clear, those of you who are here, you've heard me say this before, but I really want to make it understood that trauma explains behavior. It doesn't excuse it. So simply because I may not dehumanize somebody does not mean that I excuse their behavior or that I can't set a boundary. For example, if an individual busted up in my home right now, threatening me, my child, the nanny who's here, I would, without hesitation and without apology, kill that individual. Now, that said, I might also have understanding like, oh, maybe they did that because of mental illness. Maybe they did that because of their own trauma or whatever they may have been working through. I don't say like they came up in here because they are inherently a horrible person and they deserve to die and I hope they burn in hell. No, I am going to defend myself. I am going to set that boundary. And I don't think that they inherently are a bad person. Like Louise was saying, like there's people are children. The thing I always go to in my mind is no 18-month-old is spewing hatred. So then I have to ask myself, what happened from 18 months to right now? And again, not to excuse it, but I gotta think that there were some course of events that took that 18-month-old to where they are now. And I just wonder what those may have been. Doesn't mean you get to come over here and get all up in my space and do things. But I'm still, what is that narrative? What is that journey? What is that evolution? Because like I've also shared here, I want to be curious about where might I have similar turning points and end up doing the exact same thing. Kind of like you were saying, Louise, sometimes when I watch individuals or collectives, like I just keep coming back to the phrase of, hello, pot, let me introduce you to kettle. Like it is baffling to me that we can't sometimes recognize, most likely due to fear, that we're manifesting the same behaviors, just in slightly different ways.
Yeah, when you were speaking, when you said, what happened from 18 months to now, the same whenever I see someone doing something that is just atrocious, I have this phrase that says, that could have been me, because like I could have lost my job and had a mental breakdown and become homeless, and that would lead me to something. I could have been prescribed opioids and now I'm addicted to fentanyl and I kill somebody because I need my fix. Like we don't know what does this. So this kind of keeping the humanity, the humanizing for me, like keeps my connection to that's a part of me being acted out. I'm not above any of that. If anything, I'm like, thank you, Goddess, that I'm still sane. I'm not sane because of me. I'm just tending what's already here. Something could also happen to me that could change me tomorrow. So it's like a privilege to be clear. It's a privilege to have that impulse control and to be able to tend to the body and do the work we do. So it's another part of the rehumanizing for me to see something I hate and be like, that could be me. If I believed what you believed, I'd probably do the same thing. Byron Katie has said that very often. And I'll say one more thing before I hand over to Gray. One of my friends, Moni, who does a lot of the Braver Angels work, Monica Guzman, she's incredible. And she said to me the other day, through tears, that hate is so tricky because it makes really good people do horrible things to other people thinking they're doing the right thing. And it's such a good way to put it, right? It makes really good people do horrible things to other people thinking they're doing a good thing. I believe in my heart Tyler Robinson believed he was saving the world. Just like a suicide terrorist bomber would do. They believe they're saving the world. They believe they're doing something. I don't even usually say the word terrorist because that's my biased frame. It's like a person thinking they're doing the right thing, thinking they're liberating their community or the world of something. That's how tricky hate is. It doesn't come from it's not some mythological creature in a cliff. It's an everyday person that suddenly gets that spark and it grows, and then they actually believe what they're doing is the best thing they could do, even though it could harm, millions of people. So it's an important thing to remember. Gray, I would love your wisdom around this experience, rehumanizing, dehumanizing. Tell me what's coming up for you in this you want to offer.
So much. I feel like, uh, the first thing I want to say, though, is just to your recent point. I live in Minneapolis, so we recently had the school shooting here at the Annunciation Catholic School. And, a phrase that kept going through my head that week was, it could have been any of us, like to your point. And I have often thought about, I wrote this essay once about my grandmother, who I didn't get to connect with before she died. But, I talk about coming from this lineage of loneliness, like in my ancestry, there's just so much distance and loneliness. And my grandmother, when my grandfather died unexpectedly, like she went into psychosis. And I attribute that to not having the capacity to be with the pain of that separation and loneliness. And so that loneliness is that separation and just isolation is something that's very familiar to my body. I feel like I'm working through that for my ancestors in this lifetime and then my own sort of story and healing. But just that question is like, so like, what is it about my capacity and kind of my soul's orientation that like, instead of psychosis or dementia or slipping into harming others, I decided to alchemize the kind of inner pain that I like wouldn't wish on anyone, like the depth of that kind of loneliness and isolation. So when I was thinking about the school shooter here, I made this post about this disconnection because I'm just like, because I know what that feels like inside to be so deeply in pain and separated. And so, right, if you find some kind of extremist group online, like people just want to belong, And so if I find someone who I feel seen and validated by, impulse control, or I'm making different choices with my pain. But like exactly what you both are saying is that like I could make a really different choice with that. The pain is the same. Like I really want people to hear that. Like I'm not better than that person who did the school shooting. I just made different choices. And so to me, that's part of the humanization process where it's like, I felt deep grief for that person because I know that level of pain. I know that level of pain. And so I wanted to name that. And then Luis, your statement around like, I don't need you to agree with me. Like, I don't need agreement. I need connection, or I desire connection. And that I think part of my grief right now is just, I'm such a relational and like connection oriented being. It's like, it's all I want. And so I think to witness this much divisiveness and disconnection and separateness, that hurts my heart. And also, Luis, what you were speaking of in my own, rehumanizing myself, I think as you were talking about, the experience of sexual abuse that you had and violence, is that I would have to remain disconnected and dehumanized within myself in order to feel that way about others. And I can't do it. Like I cannot live that way. And so I have had to grapple and have my own experience with given the many painful experiences that I've had in this lifetime, what do I need to do with that in order to not just survive and like be standing, but like, be whole in my heart. And I'm going to like veer a little mystical here for a minute, because when you're talking to this, it reminded me of this blessing by John O'Donohue, where it's a blessing for a person who's done you wrong. And the last stanza says, somehow now I've begun to glimpse the unexpected fruit your dark gift had planted, and I thank you for your unknown work. And I just think that's like so beautiful about, how we choose to orient or tend to the experiences that we've had. It's like whatever happened between us, like that's a gift that somehow from the outside hurt, but it lives within me now. And how am I going to choose to relate to that? And then what am I going to do with that? Like that to me that's like the question and how we're making sense of what's happening. And then Camille, I just wanted to say with the boredom, like my reveal is that I didn't know who Charlie Kirk was until last week, because I was like, you could find me like out talking to the ducks and like crying with the butterflies. Like I just like am so uninterested in, I just like truly don't, like you're saying, Camille, I don't have time for it. Like I'm so uninterested in anything that is creating more disconnection right now. And it's not bypass, like I'm so deeply in my body and in my heart, but like am so conscious about how I'm choosing, what I'm choosing to attune to and orient to right now. Because it's like, I don't know, there's just, in my view of the world, Louise, you and I were talking about this week about choosing life. And that to me, like, there's so much love. And so there's just so much available for connection right now. I choose to live and see that.
Just catching up to you. Feels so good. When you were saying it's hard for you to live, or you can't live with that feeling that you get from that disconnect from dehumanizing. And I feel the same way. It made me want to also say out loud, just so it doesn't get twisted for myself, like I dehumanize all the time. I want people to understand that I'm not saying I'm somehow outside of this cycle. I think it's very animal. I think it's very normal to do. And what I'm saying is I'm embodied to the dehumanization in a way I didn't used to be. And it doesn't feel good in my body. And it's different for me than when I'm angry because someone violated me. There's like anger has that thing where it wants to propel you into action to enforce a boundary because you've been physically violated by somebody on some level. And then there's I'm angry at someone's rhetoric. This is where it gets tricky. This is what we're seeing from this experience, from Charlie Kirk's assassination, is I'm angry at this rhetoric. We could say the same thing for the Catholic school shooting. Same thing. It's like I'm angry at someone's belief systems. The belief systems might have harmed me. People come from his experiences in their own life where they were growing up in religious cults. So they see someone really deeply into religion, think religion is the way to even run a country. And that terrifies them because of their trauma. Understandably, I know that. I grew up Catholic. I know that feeling. And it's the somatic discernment of your rhetoric scares me, or I'm actually being infringed upon in this moment and need to act. And this is where the most controversy comes up around these conversations with figures that think different from us. People say, well, what if their policies turn into something that oppresses my freedom? That is a what if. That is a possibility at times, right? And one thing we know about traumatized bodies and brains is when you feel scared about something, it resonates as real-time threat. So this is the kind of like American experiment, if you will, or the integrity, the thing I love actually very much about America and the value of being an American is we're supposed to fight with our words, not with our bodies. We're supposed to be like, I'm not going to live in your country. That doesn't interest me. I'm going to do all this stuff to overturn this or block this or get more people to agree with me. And so I personally don't believe, especially when I see someone say something that I disagree with, that could take something away from me that I want in the future, taking that person out does nothing for the belief. The belief exists in the minds of many people. And this is why I believe very deeply in radical free speech. Camille and I are doing a whole podcast on this, in a few days, because I've spoken to Daryl Davis about this, hate crimes, hate speech. A lot of these things go in strange directions where, well, who decides what this is? And I'm not trying to get political here. I'm trying to be relational, because we do this with other people. We do this with ourselves. We do this in all of our experiences and relationships. I don't like the way I feel about what you're saying. And so instead of tending to the feeling, I need you to stop. That's what murder is. Every situation we see, whether it's an assassination on a figure, public figure, or it's a shootout in the streets, you're seeing someone that doesn't feel safe with another person, doesn't have capacity, doesn't trust, and wants to take them out. And it hasn't ended any kind of violence, right? There's no magic bullet, pun intended, to end violence. But it comes from a body with low capacity. And this is what I loved what Gray was saying about their capacity. Like when you can make another choice, I really see that as a privilege. I see people who go out and kill people as the underprivileged mentally, because that's where they're at. They think this is my only choice. It's just like someone I would work with who has suicidal ideality. They're the underprivileged mentally. They think their only option is to take their body out of this life. I was there too. I remember how that felt growing up because of the earlier instance I talked about. Privilege, in the perception and mentally speaking, is options. It's like being rich and wealthy in options. So when you see divisiveness, you see someone that literally thinks it's this or it's this. There's no middle transformative place to go to. And what I also find interesting with politics, and again, I bring this into the relational field, is when someone says something that makes me feel safe because it's me I agree with, they're right. When someone says something I don't agree with, makes me feel unsafe, they're wrong. And this is why my mentor, Bill Riddick, changed my life a couple years ago, because he told me everyone's beliefs are sacred to them. And if you can really get that and play with that, your mind and heart can transform so much. Because when I feel unsafe because of your policies or your beliefs or your opinions, but I remember that's sacred to you, for me at least, it might not work for everybody, something starts to shift in me. I don't see it as right or wrong. I see it as doesn't work for me, works for you. I've watched people celebrating politicians over the years who I was praying wouldn't become politicians or preside over anything. And I would cry watching them be happy for the person that won, because I knew how sacred it was to them. And that lets me stay connected. I'm like, oh, I know how good it feels to win. Like, what if we embraced the winning side in this country? And like, you won. Okay, let's work together now. But we have this thing of you won. I have to fight you until we win. And just like Camille's saying, even in a logical way, like non-spiritual, non-somatic, it's so illogical. It just doesn't work. Or in a way, it's so logical. It's a formula for repetition, isn't it? So I wanted to bring that reminder in around rehumanizing, that everything's sacred to the individual. I believe Tony Robinson, his choice was sacred to him. I can imagine the relief of believing what he believed and making that decision. I can imagine that for him. It's not sacred for me, but I can connect on that level to him. We all can do that, right? If we can just feel into, okay, those things that I love and I value and I cling to, they are so precious to me. Same for them. Camille, would you add anything to that? Then I want to take in some input of where we are here.
Sure. I want to go back to the point you're making about sort of the other side of dehumanization we'd oftentimes don't think about. When we think about dehumanization, really think about it, in the literal sense, which is usually where I am, like less than human. But in a lot of this space, we are actually elevating someone to more than human. In my opinion, Tyler Robinson elevated Charlie Kirk to more than human. Like, if I just silence him, all of this will end. Or whatever his intent was, it didn't happen. Because Charlie Kirk was just a man. But when we create these individuals to be more than human, we give them all this credit and, in my opinion, all of this power. And we think, well, if we just get rid of them, all of these things will end. It doesn't happen. And I experienced it particularly very viscerally with the 2016 election. Like, there was this thing in me, like, I just had to make sure Donald Trump didn't win, because if he did win, it would increase racism and it would make it harder for, at the time, my child that had just been born. And I didn't, after going through that entire election, I didn't like how I felt, the level of anxiety, the level of hypervigilance. Like, I was literally checking statistics 3 times a day to see who was going to win. And I then came back to the logic of it. I was giving Donald Trump way too much credit. Racism didn't start with him, and it wasn't going to end with him. And again, the story goes back to whether it's, logic, my capacity. It's not very moral or altruistic. I won't even necessarily it's not even about cheering or I'm happy for the other side. I'm just that basic of a bitch. I'm not going to let you have that much power over me. It just comes that I'm not going to let you have that much power over me. It's just my hair just don't part that way no more. I cannot allow that to happen anymore. And if nothing else, that's what it is. You cannot have that much power over me. I will not give you more credit. I will not put you on a pedestal. You are not more than human.
Yeah, I love that. That's that testament from finding safety in yourself too, from having that deep well in you, so you're not looking out. I was listening to a conversation, a very heated one, between a bunch of different social media influencers who were talking about this division. They had like right-wing ones, left-wing ones. They were trying to get people not really get along, but see if you could hear the other person's side. And it was total shit show. And the one guy who was on the liberal side said, he was asked, why haven't you toned down your rhetoric since this happened? Like, you're contributing to the division. And he said, I'm not going to tone anything down until Trump does it first. And it's similar to what Camille's saying, but it's also important, because we talked about this before recently in membership. When you have a nervous system that didn't develop with a lot of safety with other people, there's this very important initiation period where your body doesn't need the others to decide where it stands. Your body doesn't need someone else to reflect you completely back to yourself all the time. Like, you have this sense of self, and you have this integrity that says, this is where I am, regardless of where anyone else is. And what makes leaders so dangerous is not what they say, but it's the huge groups of people that are easily influenced by them, because they don't have that ability to come to self and say, but where am I on this? So even if this individual, our president, won't tone down the temperature, I have the power to. But I listened to this man for 15 minutes screaming at the top of his lungs at the other people on the panel, saying, I will not do it until he does it first. And to Camille's point, how much power? That's worship, in my opinion. He is worshiping Trump as an idol. I don't do that. And so no matter what kind of rhetoric anyone says, even people I fucking adore, I'm not going to mirror that. But I would have, you all know I'm a gladiator level fawner. I graduated from the Fawning Academy. I made the Fawning Academy. So I remember what it's like to have a body that's constantly reflecting the opinions back to the world and kind of deciding, how can I be based on how they are? It's very common. And it's an important part of the discussion. Like I said, we're going to get into this much more in our podcast when Camille and I hash it out with free speech, because it's why I don't believe in policing terminology or speech, because I believe what we need is actually to make the culture more resilient individually, so people can feel and find their integrity and their instincts and think for themselves. That's the sustainable route. We have plenty of historical and recent examples of trying to oppress what people think or believe. The ideas go nowhere. In fact, they ferment, and we know what happens when things ferment. That's why people hate beans. It gets bigger, it blows up. And so we want to understand, when you're allowing something to come out and you have capacity for it, even the most reprehensible beliefs, ones that disgust you, and they should, if they're against your goodwill, you should feel disgust. We are not saying bypass your cues of boundary, right? Even the ones that disgust you, to have capacity to witness them and get curious while you also feel a big no, that's what helps things transmute and transform. That's what allows them to cultivate into something new. And that's what I'm really here to talk about the most, is how quickly do we shut down or hate something we disagree with? And how can we make a different choice to be curious about the person behind the belief, so humanizing somebody, but also the beliefs itself, because like Camille said, they don't go when the person goes. Beliefs came way before that person. They will be here way after that person. And I'm sorry, no one's bias is more interesting or spectacular than another. Bias is bias. My bias is no more justified than someone else's bias. It's all the same pattern of believing there's only one way and people should be a certain way with you. Great. What would you add to any of that? And then I want to open up for like 20 minutes or so. Any members that want to be recorded can express what they're feeling, even specific beliefs or things you've seen about Charlie Kirk or other people that help you dehumanize. I would love to hear examples, things you're having a hard time with. I don't need to hear people just agreeing, though that's lovely. I would love to hear people that are kind of stuck and having some other opinions or wisdoms coming up. But sit with it first. Let's hear from Gray, and then we'll go into that.
I just wanted to echo what you said about that you dehumanize all the time. Like I really want to normalize that. And because I think to what even Camille was speaking about, or putting people up on a pedestal, I think, right, even in this community are people who are teaching, well, like, oh, but, and I made this reflection after I made that post this weekend about like what's the state of your heart if you can celebrate someone who's been murdered. And then I like kind of got this sense that I bet a lot of people are judging themselves about the state of their heart. And I was like, but that's not the like you're still kind of missing the point here, which is to be in relationship with whatever is present. Like I just want to, there's a situation in my life currently where I'm like deeply struggling with this other human, and like there has been hatred that comes up in my body, right? But I think given just the work that I've done, like I have the awareness that I don't really hate this person. Like it's really, enlivening, bringing something up for me that like would love to be tended to, So I'm like doing a shit ton of wall push. Like I'm just like working my anger through because that's how I've learned to relate to it. But it's so I just wanted to like echo that, Luis. Like this isn't about like if you're aiming for perfection, like you'll fail and you're missing the entire point about what it means to be human, which is to like be with all of the states of the heart, which include dehumanization. So I just wanted to really echo that. And then also just say, because as someone who went through your membership and chorus and had a lot of trauma in my body, for me, there was I remember feeling that particular fear around, well, if I don't protect myself now against this potential threat, like policies, especially against trans folks, right? This is very highlighted right now, is like, well, then how am I going to be safe? Like, will my body kick in? And to Camille's point about the break-in, so last August, like I was physically assaulted by this woman as I came off the bus, and my like fight response kicked in, no problem. And then this past June, a drunken man tried to break into my apartment, and it was terrifying. And I very with ease called the cops because this was a threat and a violation to my home space. So I just like want to like the body's gonna do its thing, and I like the and both of these experiences were beautiful learning experiences for me to be like, okay, babe, like you're doing, like, look at that flexible nervous system, like you go, So like, I have much less concern now and know that I'm going to mobilize when I need to mobilize. But in the meantime, just this practice, like Charlie Kirk is not a threat to me. Donald Trump, not a threat to me, So I'm going to be out with the ducks in the meantime. And like when it's time to rally, if need be, I'm going to have an immense amount of capacity to do and resource to do what I need to do at that time.
Water off a duck's back, bitch. Water off a duck's back. In the words of Jinx Monsoon, that bitch won. Yeah, I love that so much because I think the most anger I get directed at me online, people that don't know me, but online, is that I'm bypassing, that I'm not feeling anger and instead just going to like loving someone and forcing that. And so I think it just deserves to be repeated again that when I talk about rehumanizing, I am not saying you ignore what someone does, like Camille said. I'm not saying it's like kumbaya. Like you get hit coming off a train, you're just like, I love you. That doesn't work. I lived in the ghetto in New York City. It doesn't work. It's not going to happen. But it's like really understanding, I have a fight response for a reason. I have a flight response for a reason. They're supposed to kick in. Self-defense is not a problem. It's not a problem to protect your life. When we go into the realm of ideas, of policies, of things in the future, that's where we start to get twisted. Because someone's idea can land into your body as a potential threat to your existence in the future. One reason I love Grey so much is they are living proof, as a transsexual, who's living in an era where there's a lot coming at the trans community, of not internalizing that as right now I'm threatened. Camille has done the same thing, especially in the height of 2020, 2022, when there's a lot of racial rhetoric, more than usual in the mainstream. She did the same thing of having this really peaceful era of her life that I got to watch. You don't have to internalize something because you belong to a group that somebody dislikes. That's this piece of giving them all this power over you. And I loved, Gray put a post on very early on when this administration started talking in a negative way against trans people, you put this great post on that said something like, birth sex, forced to be on my passport, invitation. Can't access hormones, invitation. And what they're saying is everything that we call like an affront to our rights or our experience, there's also a choice of it to be an invitation. And I think what I love about your work too, like that question you had the other day about the sturdiness of your self-concept. They wrote, if a stranger can dehumanize you online, how sturdy is your self-concept? It's a really big question, right? So what does my self-concept rely on? Do I give policies and current privileges and rights that I have? Is that what makes me me? Right? That's a really big question. There's a lot of resilience in those answers when you sit with them. So just bringing in a practical piece, because some people will be like, well, Luis, you're not affected by the rhetoric. Well, you don't know that, first of all. And number two, I have a lot of friends in communities that technically should or would be, and they're not sweating it right now. There are a lot of Black people I have listened to crying because he was murdered. They loved him. There are gay and trans people that love this man. It's not as easy as we think. It's not there's one way or there's this way. I was telling Gray the other day, one of the most amazing experiences I had in my rehumanizing to try to because to me, rehumanizing is complexity, is bringing in all of it. Like there's so much that could exist. Eamon and I last summer went to this transsexual influencer. Her name is Blair White. People hate this woman. She's a big Trump supporter. She's a conservative. She's a gun owner, and she's a transsexual. And so she has and she's mixed race. So she has all the strange things that shouldn't be together. They're all together. And I went to her thing in Brooklyn. There were 250 people. 250 gay, bisexual, transsexuals who voted for Trump. Okay. It was amazing. I have never experienced so many confusing beliefs, all converging where they're not supposed to, from people who just don't think the way you think they're supposed to think. And one of the kind of common things that interests me in American politics in particular is thinking a certain group is supposed to think a certain way or should be outraged about a certain thing. That in itself is also dehumanizing, to distill all these individuals down to a group think. So I've been pleased to go into all these other strange places in the world that my liberal brain couldn't even fathom of before. And it's made situations like this less triggering and terrifying for me. It's made it easier to realize, oh, well, one group of trans people feel harmed by what Charlie Kirk believed. Another group mourn his loss. They agreed with him. I mean, that is something to wrap your head around. There's more than just the perception we have. And I can still disagree with his beliefs and understand that. I don't have to go on one side or the other. I don't have to pick any side. Okay, enough about me. Enough about Gray, enough about Camille. I want to hear what's coming up in your bodies for those of you that have capacity to be recorded. And this part is going to go onto the podcast and onto YouTube. If you don't, but you still want to give something so it can be heard, just DM Camille. She'll ask questions, she'll give wisdom, whatever's in there, she'll speak in her voice anonymously. So if you think you want to be public, you can raise your hand, or you can wait. In 20 minutes, we're going to go to just members only. So there's no rush.
Lindsay.
Oh, I can't even believe I'm here today. I was like, oh, do I have the capacity for this? I'm not quite sure. Because what comes up for me is my history of having to be nice to make my abusers comfortable by suppressing my feelings and not being allowed to have a boundary of wanting to be angry and push away. It's like I'm trapped in making them feel good and abandoning myself. And that's the history I've had around it. So it's like what comes up when I'm told I should have empathy, although I think I do have empathy for Kirk. But it's like I should have more. It's kind of like I should have this big like heart opening for him. And it's like, fuck off. No, thank you. I do not want that. So yeah, it's like, of course, my past coming in, my overcouplings coming in and running the show and being like, no, you can't make me feel good towards someone who I didn't feel good. And that's just because of my past.
Can I sit with you for a minute with this?
Yeah.
Because I love this. I love, first of all, that the word should came in, because none of us use that. And so that gives me a lot of insight of what other people hear when I talk about this. There's almost like you're being forced to feel something, like you said, you don't want to feel, which would be a boundary violation.
Yeah.
Let's just feel it together. What's it like to say it? What's it like to hear me even say you shouldn't have empathy if you don't? Like, what happens in your body as you're with me and with us and you're saying this? And you're realizing your history converging too. That's important.
There's like this shaky nervousness of, what if I'm wrong?
About
I'm not sure.
just what if I'm wrong? Let's feel that together.
Yeah. What if I'm wrong?
Let's feel that together. That shakiness right here in the chest. What if I'm wrong? And you just tell me what it does as you hold it, and I hold it with you, and the members are holding it with you too.
There's a part of me that's like, it's okay. And there's a part of me that's like, oh, fuck. If I'm wrong, then it's like all my feelings aren't valid.
Yes. Let's just hold that together. That's important to me. There's this part, it's like, that's okay, sweetie, you're allowed to be wrong. And there's a part that's like, no, if I'm wrong, this all goes out the window.
Yeah.
That's really powerful. I know that feeling. Yeah, and you just lean back. And what's that feel like as you lean back and feel into that?
It feels good and supported. Like I can connect with my back now, feeling supported and not just the shakiness in my chest.
Can we give it a couple more seconds together before I move on? You just tell me whatever happens next, even if it's just the same thing.
It's like there's more room to be wrong.
Yes.
Like I can feel just like seeing you and connecting with you. Like, Luis is okay if I'm wrong.
I know you're okay if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
And I feel that. I feel that with you. I'm like, she'll forgive me if I'm wrong.
Yeah. There's something really beautiful in that. Like, can we forgive each other for being wrong?
I feel little tears in my eyes, just the idea of us reflecting this thing of we could be wrong together. Like, what an interesting way to connect. Thank you for that, Grace, sweetie. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Sophie.
Hey, this is really interesting. The two things that came up for me listening to this whole conversation, the first one being, I also have this experience of not being able to hold that not humanizing part, but it's not voluntary. It's more of like, for me, it's a somatic empathy of, I was thinking of like the video of Trump being shot, and like, I'm not a Trump supporter at all, but I can feel like the physical pain of him being shot. And then I can empathize with his family seeing their husband or their dad being shot. And it's more, for me, it's that humanization of feeling what they feel. And it's probably not very healthy, but it's something that I think that's the reason for me that I don't dehumanize people. And it's not a conscious choice.
Wait, what makes you say it's probably not healthy? I'm just curious.
Because I'm taking on their emotions as my own, which is not very helpful for me. And the second thing was more around, if we are all choosing, I know this isn't what you're saying, but it's what's coming up for me. If we're all choosing to humanize everyone, then where is the space for trying to make collective change in that? Where's the space for activism in that?
We don't know because we never lived it. There might not be activism. There might be conversations. There might be strange relationships. There might be different communities. Honestly, this membership is the closest I've seen to people constantly practicing this with each other. And we still see people get triggered, piss each other off, get annoyed, but it's in a container that knows what to do with it. And so I don't know any societies, besides some like small tribal cultures that are actually showing us that still now. I'm not sure of any. It's a great question. I think it's a mystery. Do you have any insight?
No, I was just interested in what you might have to say around that.
Yeah, it's a great question. It's a great question. And I want to add to what Sophie said. I love that you said it's natural. The empathy is natural because somatic empathy. Just people listening who aren't part of the membership, they don't understand this term somatic empathy. There's empathizing, and people usually use that as a cognitive approach of trying to understand someone's situation, like imagine being in their shoes, you'll hear. And then somatic empathy is the felt sense you have. What does your nervous system do when you see someone suffer? When you see their joy, when you see them say something funny, or when you see a beautiful person? What's the felt sense in just witnessing? That's somatic empathy. We all have that. That is at the core of our being. What I see is a lot of work trying not to feel that. Well, I was amazed at the amount of people in my DMs that were really against me humanizing Charlie Kirk. I keep wanting to say Kirk Cobain. Something's going on. But humanizing Charlie Kirk is this piece of this 45-second clip of like 4 or 5 things that, are like these literally 10-second clips of him on stage or him debating, saying something that could be like, let's say, the most unethical, especially for people on the left. And I was fascinated thinking, oh, this is what's happening. Like there's an invitation to humanize, and the gut response is to look at something that continues to make you not feel your feelings for this person as a human. And Byron Katie used to say this really well. She would say, the reason why we believe our stressful thoughts is because they're not true. If they were true, we wouldn't have to constantly talk about this negative story, because it would just be true. You'd just be living this truth of how horrible you are. But if you're really a wonderful person and you're constantly thinking I'm a piece of shit, you have to think that 1,000 times a day to try to uphold a lie. And so when you're constantly trying to look at a reason why you shouldn't like someone or feel for someone, it's to interrupt, I believe what Sophie's saying, that's somatic empathy. Now, I can look at someone getting harmed and feel in my heart something for them, and simultaneously not like what they say. I just want to make it really clear. Empathy does not mean agreement. Empathy does not mean loss of boundaries at all. If I had to punch somebody out because they were coming after my daughter and I'd probably want to hold them afterwards after they were unconscious. Because like I want to punch them out, like, yeah, get the fuck away from my daughter. I can feel that in me. And at the same time, like, you're a human, I feel for you. That must have really hurt, right? Like both can exist. So I just love that you brought the somatic empathy piece in, because without pendulation, it can be an unpleasant thing if you're just stuck in other people's feelings. But to come back to yourself, ooh, I'm feeling something for seeing this person get hurt. And I'm in a chair and I'm not hurt, and here I am. And then we get to bring that feeling into our awareness, and it changes, how we move through the day, I believe. Do you want to add anything to that, Camille or Gray?
Yeah, I would say to the question around, what if we're not dehumanizing, what does activism look like? I think we've seen bits and pieces of that, particularly in individuals, but then sometimes the message gets lost. So if we think about the work of like Gandhi, Dr. Martin Luther King, Nelson Mandela, their messages were not rooted in dehumanizing another side in order for there to be progress on the quote unquote other side. That said, some of the people that they were then attracted to their movement would then use dehumanization as part of their activism. So I do think we have examples of what activism can be like outside of dehumanization, but for a lot of us, it feels like they have to go hand in hand. And then the other part, like, I just want to be transparent with y'all. I am not a good person. I am a work in progress. Like, I will sit here right now and tell you, Charlie was a prick. Like, that's just my opinion. That's my experience of him. I did not enjoy him, I don't miss hearing his voice. And I can also say, like, that was fucked up. What happened to him? And so to me, not dehumanizing doesn't mean like, oh my gosh, they were such a good person. They were a light in this world. Thank God they were here. No, because your girl's not going to say that about Charlie Kirk. But I'm also not going to say, yeah, thank God he's dead. Now the world's a better place. Because I don't think that either. I think he was a prick and I think it was fucked up the way he died. So those things can exist.
Thank you for modeling that. Great. Do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I just want to say, yeah, I echo again, right? Somehow, right? Maybe there's this overcoupling between good person and don't dehumanize. Like, let's tease those apart. Like, I love that, Camille, right? It's like, right, if you like hung out with me in my humanity, like I would probably annoy you in a lot of ways. And I can like still bring my whole heart here and like because that's the practice that I'm in, right? Because I'm a whole human and I like want you to see me as a human too, right? Because we can slip so easily into that again, the pedestalizing folks. The other thing I want to say, because this was one of the hardest things for me to learn in my own trauma healing, I see this with my clients and students all the time, is I think it is bypassing, but it's you're there. They hear that like the compassion is important or around forgiveness, and so they're still orienting and attuning to the other person's experience with empathy and compassion before doing the work to learn what is happening in their experience. So there is this like, oh, I want to be this thing, or I want to forgive, or I want to like. For me, there's so much of the work is constantly reorienting and attuning to self. So that's the sturdiness that I talk about. Like, I want to know the space that you take up in the world before I care about what you think about someone else. I want to know about you and how much you're like filling out yourself before I care about whether you have compassion for someone else. Because otherwise it's like, it doesn't mean anything to me because you're like a ghost. Like there's nothing there for it to be, it's sort of empty. And so I want that like, sturdiness, because then the compassion is coming from this like nourished it's like, oh, it's this natural extension of who I am rather than a performance.
Kasha.
Hi, thank you. I love this conversation so much. And what came up in my body is when we think about events on the large world stage, I obviously don't want anyone to die. But when I think about my own experience of people I live with that I have chosen to live with, sometimes it's harder and it's not that I want them to die, but what came up earlier around the respect, like I'm so tired sometimes of being like the good role model and setting the good example when it's not followed or house rules are not respected. And that's where it gets tricky for me. This isn't about wanting them to die, but I'm noticing that even in those small home-based situations, sometimes I'm like, fuck, can't you just like be an adult and behave? And what I'm hearing through this call is that is still sort of an echo of dehumanizing. Like I want this person to get the fuck out of my space. And so I have to look at myself, I think. I think rules and preferences need to exist, but I find myself getting into a place of like, well, if they're not respecting, then I'm not going to respect them back. And like, that's not right either. So there's this nuance that I'm sitting with. I don't know the right answer. I think what came up when Lindsay was speaking around, I can be wrong, they can be wrong, and maybe we just need more space to be wrong. And it's okay if they don't put their dishes away. I don't know. That's just kind of what came up. So it's kind of jumbled and maybe not very eloquent, but that's what I'm sitting with as a result. It's like the small real life situations in my own life. Yeah.
I'll clarify something on my part, and you can see where it goes for you. Being annoyed with somebody, wanting someone out of your house because they're being messy, being irritated by behavior, I wouldn't call that dehumanizing somebody. Like, to me, that's boundaries. That's just, this isn't working for, like you said, preferences. This isn't working for me. A preference is emerging. If I were to deduce their whole self down to being messy, like, you're a messy person, you don't deserve respect for that, I'm not going to treat you kindly because of that, then we're getting into dehumanizing. So I just wanted to be clear for everyone listening and for yourself. It's like the boundary and not liking something, there's nothing dehumanizing about that. We need that. But when I use that to define the person and then justify they don't deserve, to be treated like a human, that's when I'm going into dehumanizing. Does that make sense?
It does. Thank you for clarifying that, because now I started like being down on myself, going like, I'm this horrible person and I try to be a good person. So that really helped. Thank you.
Yeah. I think you can be a great person and be really annoyed by somebody. The two things aren't aren't what do you like to say, Camille, mutually exclusive. It's like like you're completely allowed to be so irritated. Like, hey, we have this rule to do your dishes after you eat a meal so the next person doesn't have to do them. You didn't do that. If you don't do this rule, you can't live here. That's not dehumanizing, that's a boundary. I don't know if Camille and Gray want to add to that. I see Camille having a blast over there.
My home is just a very sacred space. Yeah, so it just touches a place in me. Yeah, I don't think I'm just going to reiterate. I don't think it's dehumanizing. Say, yeah, like clean up your shit. I don't think that's dehumanizing. It would, in my opinion, go to dehumanizing. It's like, oh, people who are such and such are messy people. Like then it becomes dehumanizing, or that you're clearly subhuman because you can't clean up your shit. Then it's dehumanizing. But yeah, to say like, hey. I do like I even like to notice the difference between a rule and a boundary. You know, like a rule is like you need to clean up after yourself in the kitchen. A boundary is only people who clean up after themselves can live in my house. And I'm very content in setting that boundary. But what you were saying, Kasha, which stood out for me is when we bypass that boundary, when we go into fawning, what are the byproducts? Resentment and rage, or in this case, disrespect. So then we start to have those passive aggressive, disrespectful things because we're not actually allowing the true boundary that's there. I'd like you to clean up your dishes to exist, and then it continues to snowball into more passive aggressive forms of disrespect or thoughts of disrespect.
So I want to pause for a minute. We're going to continue, but we're going to continue off air. What I want to say before getting off air is we're kind of sitting with the somatics of dehumanizing and hating, what it feels like, just so we can track it. We're understanding some nuance around different ways to look at it, maybe how to transform how we see it. What is it not? Getting clear about boundaries, preferences, all those pieces. And then the one thing I really want to close with, and I'm using Charlie Kirk as the example because that's what's coming in right now. But again, you can use anybody in your mind that's come up in this session. Can you pause and let yourself feel softness for this person? And really, I'm going to highlight the word should here because Lindsay said it. I'm not saying you should. I'm asking you if you can. I'm asking you if you want to. And I'm asking you just for like a minute. Just, can you see the person outside of what they said, outside of what they believed, outside of what they did to you? Can you pause just to see that aspect of them? And is there a part of you that can soften to them or not? I'm just going to give a minute. And just respond to Camille in the DM if you tried that just now, just to see what happened. The goal wasn't for you to suddenly feel great about someone if your body can't. It's just to see what happens when I give myself a minute just to try. What does my body do? She'll share anonymously.
Numbness and shutdown. It's easier for me to soften when I imagine them as a child. Confusion. Yes, I feel softening, but it doesn't last long before the constriction reasserts. I feel neutral. I don't know them. Warm, open heart space. My body enters into a reflection of if I was sitting one-on-one with the other. I feel indifferent, and there is shame around that.
So what I want everyone to do is, regardless of what your answer was, what you felt, my kind of baseline practice with this work, especially this kind of parts work, like what part can feel this, is to tend to whatever came up. If you're noticing a constriction, instead of the judgment of I shouldn't feel this, ask yourself why I feel this. Not even why, like there's something wrong with it, but what's there for you? What's the emotion around the tension? What's the belief? What's the fear? What is in need? There's so much information in that. If you feel the softness, tend to that. What lets you deepen that softness? What's the story or the other factor coming in softening you to an individual, right? Indifference, like I don't really care, and then you judge it. Again, instead of judging it, feel what it's like to not really care without judgment. How does it feel somatically? What's it like to be with it? Not everything in the world is for you to care about. You're allowed to not care, right? Everyone reserves that right as far as I'm concerned. So whatever this constriction, tension, softness, whatever was came up, just sit with it, get some information from it, see what it has to show you. And what I hope you're learning from this part of the segment is just the somatics of dehumanizing. Because I want to remind you, is those little pinpricks that we can ignore, and those little pinpricks that make us watch things about people or talk bad about people or continue the whatever the rhetoric is about anybody, even our beloved friends and partners in our lives. That pinprick, when you get to know it, it can stop you in your tracks. So like Camille said, you don't spend your time or your energy or your life trying to take someone down in your own mind, not even in the real world, and just see how that affects you. And you also reserve the right to reject every fucking thing we have said and do whatever you want to do, because it's your body, it's your life. Thank you for watching today's episode. Please like and subscribe if you found it useful, and let me know in the comments what you want me to cover next. I have developed a 4-week self-paced course that takes 18 years of my personal and professional experience and puts it into one place where you can easily and quickly learn the foundations of recovering from stress and trauma. How does the food you eat affect your stress levels? How do the relationships in your life create stress or peace? How does the relationship you have with your body allow you to feel happier and more settled? I will cover all this and so much more in this 4-week self-paced course. And the best part, it's self-paced. You don't have to sign up at a certain date or finish it at a certain time. It's yours for life, and it's waiting there for you when you're ready to finish it. Throughout this course, I'll be teaching you philosophies and practices that combine my 3 favorite modalities: somatic experiencing, embodied parts work, and nutrition. For more information on this course, click on the link in my episode details. Listen, do you hear something? That's the sound of warm, delicious, glorious Costa Rica. And this is where I am headed next. On February 28th, I'm hosting a week-long retreat at the stunning Blue Spirit Retreat Center. And it's going to focus on recovering from emotional eating and people-pleasing by finding safety within. And there's truly not a better place for me to teach this than Blue Spirit. Blue Spirit has created a literal sanctuary for wildlife, native plants, and people who are lucky enough to retreat there. Picture a vibrant jungle canopy atop a hill with a saltwater infinity pool, yoga classes, next-level local cuisine, and beautiful views of the land and sea. Not to mention the very special magical experience of wading in the saltwater pool while a crew of little baby monkeys rests on the branches above you. Your room is situated just minutes from the most beautiful ocean I've ever met, with tide pools featuring everything from blue octopus to starfish and a rainbow variety of tropical fish. And yes, I will be personally introducing you to each and every one of them. So let's go into the retreat itself. I'll be joined by my dear friends Zach and Camille as we teach you the art of finding safety in yourself, especially as it relates to fawning and people-pleasing and eating habits, which are all very connected. I'm going to teach you how to eat to recover from stress and trauma, how to use food cravings as a compass for unmet needs, how to tend to your capacity for being seen and being uncomfortable so you can stop fawning so much, and how to embody and ground big emotions and sensations that arise in your body. It's an easy flight to the airport, and Blue Spirit will manage your transportation from there. Visit holisticlifenavigation.com and click on events for more information, or click on the link in the episode details. We will be waiting for you on the other side in glorious, warm, vibrant Costa Rica.